Be put back on the map, get the listeners up, get carried on.
Every 5 years or so, we'll give you the call.
Yeah.
And hopefully you'll do the job. Listen, you're still in fashion, mate, so it should work for us today. It should work. You might even get another England call-up after this one. It worked last time.
Well, the centre-half they've got, I wouldn't put it out the question.
That's true, yeah. We've got loads to talk about. We'll get into Paul Pogba shortly, but we must point out that one of the reasons you're here is because you've got what is an amazing book, actually. What's the title of it?
The Greatest Games.
And it is about the greatest games, but actually it's a really authentic football book, isn't it? If you love football and if you've got a bit of knowledge about football, it's something you're passionate about, that's the book for you, isn't it?
Yeah, I think in, obviously, the first lockdown that we had, I think a lot of TV stations were showing old games and we were all reminiscing, of old things, looking back at Euro 96, maybe Italia 90. And that was the time we were doing the book, so I think everyone was getting into it in some ways. But I almost think a lot of the older games, if you like, I started watching football mid-80s, really. So the first game is Everton Bayern Munich. Everton's most famous game, and almost trying to give that the Monday Night Football treatment, if you like, really look in real detail at those games. And a lot of famous games in there, spoke to the biggest people involved in those games, whether they be managers or players, and quite pleased with it.
Yeah, it's good. We're going to pick out 3 of the games from the book, and we'll do the first one in just a moment. But it's not, for those who might be thinking it's all Liverpool, it really isn't all Liverpool, is it? There's a little bit of Liverpool in there, but it's not all Liverpool. And there's an amazing England game in there, which we'll get onto later. But the first one we want to talk about is the 2011 Champions League final, which is Barcelona 3, Man United 1. And you talk to Wayne Rooney about this. There's some incredible revelations about this final and how he basically disagreed with Fergie's tactics for it, didn't he?
Yes, I mean, I look back at the game, and when you look back at the game, you're quite shocked, really, when you look at the setup of Manchester United. I mean, but you're also very wary of who am I, or who's Wayne Rooney to question Sir Alex Ferguson in some ways. But you do look at it and you think that Barcelona midfield is possibly the greatest midfield of all time. When you look at the 3 players, Iniesta, Busquets and Xavi. And Man United went with 2 players in there. And the 2 players weren't Brian Robson and Roy Keane, 2 of the greatest midfield players of all time. I think they'd have had a job trying to stop them, but it was actually Ryan Giggs and Michael Carrick. So watching the game, and I mean, it was a masterclass from Barcelona, and it was just interesting getting, Wayne, the most high-profile Manchester United player at the time, the man who scored the goal in the game, his take on what he felt, because we've all been there when a manager gives a team, he gives his team talk, and you say the right things publicly, but maybe when, as Wayne is now, he's not with United, or, you retire, you'd almost give you maybe more honesty in what you think. And we've all been there in team meetings when a manager gives the team, you think, I don't like the look of this. You do, but you go out and play. You never question the manager, but you do look at that game and think maybe Sir Alex Ferguson and Manchester United were just too brave for themselves, really, considering what they were coming up against.
What's really interesting about it is because in 2008, when United did win the Champions League, beat Chelsea on penalties, in the semi-final they'd beaten Barcelona in a very defensive, negative way. 0-0 first leg, they won the second leg 1-0. You couldn't really get more defensive than that, but that was a way to beat Barcelona. But that was when Carlos Queiroz was at the club, and he left the summer after they'd won that Champions League final. So the next year they get back there against Barcelona, doesn't work. A couple of years later, it's Barcelona again, doesn't work. And it was because, as Wayne reveals, Fergie really hated being so defensive. He wanted him on the front foot. But it just wasn't going to work against that Barcelona side because arguably, I always thought that the Liverpool side of the late 80s was the best club side I'd ever seen. Couldn't really measure them in Europe for obvious reasons. But that Barcelona side then was right at its peak. It was brilliant, wasn't it, at the turn of the decade?
It was. That's the greatest club team I've ever seen. And I think that team have changed football. And a lot of that is in the book. A lot of what we talk about in the book is those specific games that we go through, but also the change in styles and systems and how the game's played, and also saying that there's no right or wrong way to play football. It's just whatever you see and deem fit, make sure you're good at that. You start with Everton playing 4-4-2 against Bayern Munich, and you're finishing with Barcelona playing football out of this world, players interchanging in different positions. So I think a lot of what we see in football now, I think, comes from that Barcelona team, how teams use the goalkeeper, how they play out from the back. And I just think the frustration possibly with the manager in Sir Alex Ferguson was the fact that Barcelona never changed. They always play their way. We're Manchester United. We're as big as Barcelona. Who could argue with that? And I think it's fair to say also, I don't think Fergie's way of playing did them too much harm over the 26 years he was there. But I think there's certain games where we've all got to hold our hands up and say the opposition are better than us. And maybe the influence, as you mentioned then, of Carlos Queiroz was a deciding factor in that.
Yeah, could have had a bigger influence than maybe we thought at the time, actually. Because Fergie got the glory, and understandably so. It was on his shoulders when it went wrong and when it went right as well. But the influence of the assistants was always there all along, wasn't it? In terms of Wayne Rooney, can you believe he's now bottom of the Championship?
No, I think he would have envisaged going to Derby that he was going to propel them into the Premier League. They come very close under Frank Lampard. I think they brought the new manager in, Cocu. I think there's no doubt, for me, Wayne Rooney will be manager of Derby County next, I would imagine. I think that was one of the big reasons why he's come in. I've read his newspaper articles that he's done. He's got a really great brain on football, Wayne. When you listen to him speak about it, we've had him on Sky Monday Night Football. He does columns in the Sunday Times, and as I said, that's why I wanted to speak to him with the book. His understanding of football is fantastic. So there's no doubt for me he will go into management, and that just seems like the next natural phase for Derby. That they're struggling near the bottom. Eventually, I think the manager would lose his job in that situation, unfortunately for him, and I think it's all set for Wayne to take the job.
What's really interesting, I thought about you when they hit the bottom of the table. Yeah, all the time, mate. That's the name my son after you, obviously. But when they hit the bottom of the table, I was thinking, I wonder if Wayne regrets dropping down the leagues, because you never did that, did you? At the end at Liverpool, that was it. And you probably could have gone elsewhere lower down the leagues, but decided, no, that's it, I want to finish at Liverpool. Well,
I'm not sure I could have gone down, actually, because it wasn't until today then Ali McCoyster's revealed he tried to sign me at Rangers. That's the first time I've ever heard anyone actually tried to sign me.
So you didn't know about that?
No.
Right.
I think he may have mentioned it when I'd finished, but I didn't know how serious he was, so I'm not sure I was rated too highly to go down the lower leagues. But in all seriousness, I think I would never have gone down there. And I always remember John Terry speaking to me about Bournemouth coming in for him. Now, they weren't in the Championship, they were lower in the Premier League, but they conceded a lot of goals under Eddie Howe and played some great football going forward. But I always think as a defender you've got to be very careful. I think Rio found that when he went to QPR, that you haven't got that protection around you, you're not dominating games, you're not playing with better players, and I think as a defender you can look really exposed. So I think the clever and pragmatic decision was to finish at Liverpool and play a few games from the bench.
Are you saying you bottled playing in the lower leagues? I had to get that in.
I never bottled it as much as you bottled it when I come down with them boxing gloves and you come down to Liverpool.
Well, walked into a room full of your family and friends and thought, oh, I've got a big problem going on here. Somehow survived the evening, but it was a memorable evening, let's put it that way. Need to ask you about loads of other stuff, and of course we're going to talk about some of the subjects of the day, including Paul Pogba. Didier Deschamps, his national team manager, has come out and defended him, so we'll get your views on that very shortly. Jamie Carragher is with me on Drive for the next 3 hours through till 7. You can join in as well if you want to talk about